The approach that we take on all projects, in addition to what we're doing at Acqua, is very much a passive environmental design. And what that basically means is that it has all of the benefits that one would normally find in any sort of splendid waterfront residential development that one would find in some of the best parts of the world, but it is also very, very responsive to the environment. We're increasingly living in a world whereby the depletion of the natural resources is having huge cataclysmic effects on our environment. So the importance of being able to try and preserve the environment for future generations is quite key. So one of the important factors here was to try and preserve the environment, but at the same time try and strike that balance between restraint in the preservation and delight in terms of trying to create a premier waterfront residential development. So the be-all and end-all for us was to try and create something that was truly spectacular on the waterfront, but at the same time highly sustainable. I mean, at the end of the day, when you look at any waterfront development, be that in the River Thames, be that on the Seine in France, be that in Al Raha Beach in Abu Dhabi, it is all about celebrating water. It is about to try and get that sense of waterfront living that was so important for us. We've had experience in this for many years now through residential developments like Battersea Reach in London, Vauxhall Tower. So certainly this was something that we wanted to try and bring to the Pasig River. What we're seeing here is a fundamental change in the urban environment in Manila, and we believe that the Pasig River is ripe and it's timely to be able to try and create this new catalyst for regeneration. What's wonderful about Acqua is that it is acting as that catalyst for regeneration, and it's celebrating the water to try and create a destination not only for those living there, but for those visitors wanting to get a dining experience in the evening time. Good design is passive design, and what we are trying to do here is not create a design that is just about sticking wind turbines on top of buildings to try and generate energy. No, some of the best designs have actually been very traditional, very passive designs that look at the appropriate orientation of the building in order to minimize the negative effects of low-angle sun, for example, or the ability to try and harvest cross-ventilating winds to try and keep the interior spaces cool. So really it's a back to basics approach to sustainable design. And what that really means is that we can actually look at natural light, natural ventilation, the ability to have green roofs that can actually be not only sociable spaces for people to enjoy interacting with one another or getting a view over the Rockwell skyline, but at the same time actually having those environmental benefits of being able to reduce the ambient temperatures, and with that also reducing the rainwater runoff. So all of these little elements collectively make for a very sustainable design. Socially sustainable in terms of the places that can actually start to foster a sense of community and allow people to interact and intermingle and have a good time. Economically sustainable because it's driving down the running cost of the building. And environmentally sustainable because at the end of the day, what we need to try and do is create something that is appropriate for the place and the climate, so that it's not eating up a lot of the energy required to power a building. So collectively, these are the sort of the attributes to creating a sustainable design solution here. What's quite curious is that man has always been fascinated with nature. Man has also got this sort of fascination with ingenuity and being able to try and mock nature sometimes. What we try to do here is kind of assimilate some of those natural aspects that we find in some sort of very densely foliated and lush environments like the jungle. What we wanted to try and do was create a situation whereby the rooftop could be metaphorically grabbing all of that water from the heavens, allowing it to cascade down the buildings, and then start to interact with the landscape. And if we can start to imagine that these sort of rock formations are actually formed within the building landscape, and its giant pebble for the recreational club is actually just one of those big boulders that one may see in a mountain ravine or a jungle. What we're starting to create is this situation whereby this water path is trickling through the built environment and then cascading down the facades. What we're experiencing then is almost like this urban habitat man-made recreation or reinterpretation of a natural waterfall and stream and natural rock formations and lush foliage. So what we're creating is an experience, and an experience that becomes a destination. And a destination then that people can actually think, yes, I actually want to live here. This is something that is characterized and is something that will give me enjoyment on a daily basis. It's a very, very good question. And dare I say it, no. This is very, very different. And that's what's been always a continuing challenge, which is very, very enjoyable. We like working with Century because it always throws up these very, very interesting challenges. And it always means that we're at the cutting edge of coming up with something that is innovative, something that is new, something that is sustainable, and something that is enjoyable. Now, yes, we've been responsible for some of the most cutting-edge residential developments in the world. As I mentioned earlier, Battersea Reach, which is a prime waterfront property on the River Thames in London. We've done the Vauxhall Tower, which is going to be one of the most sustainable, one of the tallest residential towers in Europe when completed in a couple of years' time. Al Bandar in Abu Dhabi, which is a waterfront residential development on Al Raha Beach, which is one of the best-selling schemes in the Emirates. So we are no strangers to doing high-end residential developments that embrace the water. This, however, sets some very particular challenges. The Pasig River for one, but where there are challenges, there are opportunities, and that's what we really enjoy. Salford Quays, for example, in the UK, used to be a place filled with warehouses and left largely derelict with very little value. But the fact was we were able to release the value by just exploring the waterfront potential. It's now one of the most successful residential developments. So I do see a very, very particular opportunity here. What was once an old sugar refinery is suddenly being given a new lease of life in this new residential development onto the waterfront. So should be very, very interesting. What we're really wanting to try and create is a thoroughfare that people can enjoy as an evening retreat, a food and beverage environment that is not only densely foliated to ensure that it creates an ambient temperature that is right and conducive for evening conversation, for eating and drinking, but also a very pleasurable viewing experience. So yes, we can hear the sort of the passing of the water, but at the same time, when it's kind of filled with lush foliage, it can certainly enhance that waterfront feeling. We see wonderful examples of these all around the world. Clarke Quay and Boat Quay in Singapore, for example. I guess if one was to draw an analogy, I guess it is somewhat akin to Clarke Quay and the idea that there could be bars and restaurants and eating opportunities to spill out onto the waterfront. So one can wine and dine, but also get an opportunity to be actor and spectator in public. You can be sort of the actor in a scene, but also be a spectator of those people walking by. When we were given this brief to do something that was actually quite water and green and lush jungle sort of experience influenced, the pebble was metaphorically seen as the largest rock. And what we've tried to do is not be so literal, so that it's not going to end up looking like something out of a set of the Flintstones, but actually something that is like an object, a beautifully sculpted object that would actually house the recreational club, a pristine and premier gym facility that will have an abundance of equipment that will allow people to just get fit and enjoy a healthier lifestyle, and also water pools and swimming pools and climbing facilities. So this object, this pristine white pebble, if you will, is sort of encapsulating all of those recreational activities. But it also forms a very interesting counterpoint in terms of the urban design. If you look at the surrounding buildings of Manila and the skyline, they're all very, very rectilinear, very, very sharp-edged. This curvaceous form will be a striking new icon for the Pasig River and will become something that is so highly noticeable. People will say, okay, let's go here. Why? Because it's recognizable. And so maybe in the future people will not only say, let's go down to the Pasig River, maybe they'll go and say, let's go down by the Pebble. In so many cultures, water has been kind of, it is the essence of life itself. I mean, you only have to go back to elements of the Islamic culture whereby water was essential in the description of heaven, the idea that the water fountain was at the center of the Islamic garden. It's the very same in the medieval gardens in the UK. So whichever cultural context we're in, water is so important. And today, when we look at the depletion of our natural resources, we know that oil is depleting at a rapid rate, with 86 million barrels of oil consumed on a daily basis just to satisfy our own consumerist needs. Water is probably the second most important resource. So water is very, very central, not just because we got the Pasig River on the doorstep, but also because it's such an important element to our everyday sustenance, whether it's for cleaning or washing or just for drinking. So water preservation is key. What we're wanting to try and do with the abundance of green foliage and planting is to ensure that all of that excess water is not just running away, but is actually held on the site, so that we're able to sort of harvest that water to use for irrigation, but at the same time use it for all of its cultural and social benefits. Looking at water pools, looking at the influence of water in and around the rock formations and into the swimming pools is very, very important to also evoke a real sense of lifestyle. And so what I think is important is not just to associate water with just the Pasig River, but the way that it just transcends all of these different social, economic, environmental properties. And ultimately, that's what makes it very, very sustainable. We've been very careful to actually cite local indigenous species. Why? Because we do not believe it's right to suddenly be bringing trees from halfway around the world on a freight to be dropped into a very alien environment. Philippines has a wonderful climate, wonderful sort of temperatures, you have a certain amount of humidity, you've got good sort of prevailing winds, and so what we need to ensure is that the planting that we use is very, very indigenous to the place. That's what will allow the planting to flourish. And with that wonderful humidity and with that wonderful temperature, this will flourish far faster than what one would find in, say, Europe or the Middle East. It'll be a very, very densely foliated landscape environment on the site, which I think people will very much enjoy. Because at the end of the day, in many urban environments and very densely built-up environments that have a lot of hard surfacing, what we find is that temperatures increase. It's called the urban heat island effect. And what we find in research is that you plant in a very, very densely foliated way, there is every opportunity to actually reduce ambient temperatures. To give you an example, Chicago planted 250,000 square meters of rooftop gardens. This has actually been able to reduce the ambient temperatures by between 1 and 4 degrees centigrade. So why not take that opportunity? Not only create a pleasurable walking environment for those living, working or playing in that vicinity, but also create something that will have an environmental benefit by reducing the temperatures. I think what we often find is that we always assume that planting has to be